Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Plain Speaking, a voice of the Democratic Party. And I'm very happy to have our stellar panel today. To my far left, and I love that term, is Tom Patterson, who is a very active member of our party. And to my immediate, if I turn the wrong way, to my immediate right is Robin Aurandt, who is a member of the state committee and also of our local committee. And to my left is George Thompson, who is our treasurer, as well as our chairman of the research department for our county committee, and has done a stellar job there too. Good morning, panel. And we have a pretty extensive agenda, which we never do get to all the way. But I think one of the biggest issues, of course, that's facing us today is the Affordable Care Act. And of course, our friends on the other side like to refer to it in very derisive terms as Obamacare. But nonetheless, it is the law of the land and should be accepted as such. We are having a plethora of problems, and that means a whole lot of problems. And we'd like to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm going to ask George if you'll give us a brief summary of just what are the main points of this Affordable Care Act, because we're all hearing a lot of complaints and a lot of people who are saying, we don't know, I can't get on the site and all that. So before we worry about those issues, George, would you give us a capsule view of what are the main points about the ACA that the viewing audience should know about?
Well, my overview sort of begins before the ACA.
Okay.
American health care is the most expensive in the world by double what most countries pay for health care.
Absolutely.
And this is preceding Obamacare. It has nothing to do with Obamacare. Now, the World Health Organization surveys all the countries and the expenditures for health care. It's a very infrequently cited fact. And in fact, the Republicans don't cite it at all because they want to somehow make you believe that we have the best health care system in the world, and why even fiddle with Obamacare. In fact, I just heard former Vice President Cheney make that statement on an interview he had. Now, even though it's double the cost of most other countries' health care, our results aren't really that great. We are down in the longevity of people. You would think if we have this premier health care system, people would tend to live longer, and we don't. Now, there's a contradiction here. I mean, Cheney said that, we have this high-tech medical system, and that part is true. People come from other countries to utilize our stellar healthcare system. The problem with our statistics and what brings the United States down is there's so many people that don't have health care. And so when you factor in all the people that are getting subpar health care, basically they go to the emergency room to get their health care.
And there's roughly 30 to 40 million people in the United States today, at least that many, who don't have it. And over 800,000 in Pennsylvania.
Right. In Pennsylvania, 800,000, 700,000. There's a group of people in Pennsylvania that really have no health insurance. They just go to the emergency room if they get seriously ill. And by the way, that's an expensive way to provide health care.
Yeah, it is.
And that is one of the contradictions here with the way people think. How could you possibly end up, the Congressional Budget Office has stated that Obamacare will actually cost the federal government less money. Well, now, how can this possibly be? You're covering more people with health care, but it's costing less. It's like an unbelievable statement. But if you actually examine what really goes on in the United States, people aren't getting no health care. They just wait until they get very sick, the ones that have no insurance.
What is the add-on to people that have insurance to the cost of the uninsured? It's like $1,500 a year or something.
Well, right. We all pay for this uninsured population by increase in premiums or taxes.
So if the law would provide coverage for everybody, then the so-called assessment of $1,500 that we are all each paying would be diminished, and then our premiums could go down as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the way some people paint the requirement, the individual mandate, certainly has gotten a lot of people upset. How dare the government make me carry health insurance? But the way it's been properly described, if you don't have health insurance, you're actually a freeloader.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the young people don't get sick because of their age, but then they also get into accidents. They have maternity benefits if they, you know, they end up getting government paid medic.
And you know, you have to license your dog. You have to have car insurance. Why wouldn't you have to have insurance for sickness? I mean, that jump is natural to me.
Yeah,
Well,
Tom?
car insurance is the same way. I pay car insurance. I never have an accident. So why do I need it? But yet I'm paying for somebody else that doesn't have a stellar driving record. And this is the same deal with Obamacare.
Well, see, I think the whole idea of insurance is that you don't buy because you're planning on having something
using
happen.
it.
It's more or less like, well, if it does happen,
You're
then
covered.
I have the coverage available,
Yeah.
you know. So when we take a look at this whole thing with the ACA, what are the deterrents that you have heard about that most people are concerned about the whole process? In other words, the Republicans are attacking it. From your standpoint, is there any legitimacy to some of the things they're saying about it, that, you know, it's going to be less effective, it's not going to cover
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly the insurance exchange, by all accounts, has not worked the way people expected it to work. In fact, it's run across all sorts of programming roadblocks, and you know, that's really jeopardizing the initiation of the healthcare system, because a lot of the people that they wanted to sign up, younger people that would tend to do this by going on the insurance exchange, right now they're frustrated because you can't get in. So that's certainly a valid criticism.
Mm-hmm.
As far as criticisms prior to this, and of course there have been all sorts of criticisms. For example, it's going to cost the government too much money. We can't afford it. Well, in regard to the Medicaid expansion here in Pennsylvania, and actually in just about any state, different analysis. The Rand Corporation, Pennsylvania's Independent Fiscal Office, it's part of the Pennsylvania government, has done an analysis of the Medicaid expansion in Pennsylvania. There's the Pennsylvania Economy League has done an analysis of the expansion, and they've concluded it actually will save Pennsylvania money. And the reason is because it's 100% federally funded for the first 3 years. It's a no-brainer almost that you should go and participate in this.
Exactly.
Instead, what Governor Corbett has done, he's still not, we haven't reached an agreement whether we're going to expand. He's apparently submitted plans to Catherine Sebelius, the Health and Human Services Secretary under the Obama administration, and it's outlining different requirements, sort of rewriting some of the eligibility requirements, making it more difficult for some people to get on Medicaid.
So once again,
yeah, and I guess I
Affordable
should.
Care Act is
This
gonna be-
gets all complicated. There's a group of people, and I'm not sure how many are on Medicaid already.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about these people already on Medicaid. There's an expansion for people that previously were ineligible to receive Medicaid, and this is authorized by Obamacare. And this is the thing that when it went to the Supreme Court, originally Obamacare expected every state to participate.
Right, and you're right.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court said, well, no, we're going to say that Obamacare was legal, but not that portion. You can't sort of like blackmail states into expanding their Medicaid system. This is what the Supreme Court said. And so they made it optional. And most states have chosen to jump on because it's such a good deal.
Including some really
Well,
rabid Republican
Chris
states.
Christie, you know, has said
Scott
that he.
in Florida,
Kasich in Ohio.
Snyder in
we're
Michigan.
surrounded, actually. I think we're the only state that hasn't agreed to expand Medicaid. And instead, Governor Corbett is using this as an opportunity, would be his view, to change the rules. And there's like a workplace requirement. He's included. He also includes a different mental health component under Obamacare. Mental health coverage is mandated.
Expanded, yeah.
And he's Governor Corbett has. It's not that he's rejecting the payment for mental health, but he's changing the rules. And part of the thing, there's a messaging problem people accuse the Obama administration of on this whole health care thing. I have to say that Governor Corbett also has a messaging problem. I don't really know what he's actually specifically complaining about.
He's just being obstreperous. I think he's picking issues that have no credibility, because if they did, other states would have joined in. And he's picking things that are his justification for refusing to expand the Medicaid participation, whereas other governors have accepted this, and they're getting full cost for the first year and the first 3 years, I think it is, and after that it's a 90% coverage.
Yeah, it's very simplistic. That's the problem. That's what I don't think a lot of people understand. It's simple.
And now with, I know there were some complaints about the implementation, and I think, George, you've been hearing this too, that the president had made repeated statements that people who have existing plans would not have to give them up. Well, and of course our friends on the other side of the aisle are calling him a liar and things of this sort. But I don't think he intended to lie. I don't know whether he fully understood the implications of that. These companies would immediately jump on the bandwagon and start denying the policies that people had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a complicated issue, and there was no question in my mind, things right from the beginning, that was part of the mandated services. By definition, we're eliminating different pre-existing insurance policies. This was one of the reasons why the Republicans kept talking about, well, just let us buy our health insurance out of state. In other words, Pennsylvania had regulatory framework mandating certain services. Every state generally had mandated services if you sold health care in their state. But some states didn't. Some states you could go buy health care and they didn't cover a range of things. And that is why, let's say in Pennsylvania, we never allowed the person to buy their health care from a company in, let's say, Arkansas, that would not offer, they would offer health care, but it wouldn't cover so many things. And the reason you have to get so intrusive in the way people, companies offer their health care is because if they don't cover certain things, then it ends up the taxpayers covered under Medicaid. Because if you get seriously ill, and a lot of the things that weren't covered were serious illness, they had caps on things.
Yeah.
Hey, you get a cancer diagnosis, and it's not uncommon you could just spend $1 million on treatment. And if an insurance had let's say a cap of $100,000, well, what are you going to do? Just die?
Limit care.
Well, you don't. You go on Medicaid.
That's right.
I mean, that's what people do. They go on Medicaid, and that's the taxpayers that
and that's the expansion would have covered that then. And I think one of the reasons that these companies are canceling policies is that their plans that now exist are not inclusive enough for some of the things that Obamacare is mandating. So I think they may rewrite them once the state agrees to the Medicaid expansion and they set up these exchanges. But until then, I think the issue right now is before the House of Representatives, and of course we've been all reading that the Republicans are going to put a bill in fact I think it's in committee today, which will force insurance companies to let people keep their plans no matter what.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I have some pertinent information
okay,
also.
Give us
I got from Tom Hartman's blog. He states that millions of insurance policies are being canceled across the U.S. while companies are blaming Obamacare. And the real reason's greed, obviously. The two people in California say their insurance company caused their cancellation in order to jack up their premiums under the Affordable Care Act. A Mr. Paul Simon and a Ms. Catherine Corker are suing Anthem Blue Cross, claiming that the company tricked them into giving up their grandfathered plans, which they could have kept even after the health care law. Their lawsuit states that Blue Cross concealed information about the consequences of switching plans and intentionally misled its policy holders to encourage replacement of grandfathered policies. Just like the president said, if these customers liked their health care, they could keep it under the health care law. But Blue Cross enticed customers to change policies in 2011, which meant that their plans were no longer grandfathered in the health care law.
Well, and I think there are, and I think the insurance companies are not blameless. I think they're playing the game too. And I think what we got to do, when we talk about these issues, you talk to some of the old timers who are familiar with when Social Security came out and Medicare and Medicaid came out. There were a multitude of problems with those bills too. But at least the parties at that time were willing to sit down and work out the kinks.
Make it
but
better.
Today we have such a level of animosity that the sides cannot come to the table and say, okay, we understand that it's not a perfect law, but we should be willing to sit down.
Well,
and
they're
make it better.
intentionally distorting it. Like you say, Robin, the promise that President Obama made actually is applied for all those grandfathered clauses. But like you're stating, the insurance company got the people to change the policy that was grandfathered, the policy that they had, and as soon as that happened, that policy no longer is has to be offered.
Once again,
it can
it's
be
greed.
dropped.
It's greed. When you have profit in healthcare, that is so not moral. The implications that it.
Well, I agree. With private health insurance, people have got to understand this is private health insurance. Even under Obamacare, it's private insurance
That's right.
companies doing it.
It's just making.
And what it is, if they deny coverage, it goes right to the top, to the bottom line of their profit.
Yeah.
These are private, for-profit companies. Aetna, different Blue Cross and Blue Shield really is too. And
Kaiser,
all these are private healthcare companies, and if they can deny something, then it's extra profit for them. I mean, to me, it's just such an obvious thing, but yet people are buying into this argument. Get the government out of healthcare. I don't understand what the problem is. The only government-run healthcare is actually Medicare, and even that really isn't government-run because you use private providers.
And they have to bid on it.
You have private doctors, private hospitals. I mean, there's nothing socialistic about this proposal. It's actually a piggyback off of original Republican ideas, and people have to have a level of understanding about this. If they keep listening to the $400 million spent on advertisements convincing them that it's a socialistic plot to take over the healthcare system, totally inaccurate, and it's their problem.
In fact, the Koch brothers just spent millions and millions on trying to sway college students to not get into the Affordable Care Act. They're giving them pizza and beer at parties to lay their spiel to them, so they'll end up not accepting the Affordable Care Act.
Well, the thing about it is, and I don't think that there was ever any intent on the part of the president or the Democrats who voted for this bill in any fashion to diminish the health care in America. It was intended and will cost less, provide more benefits, if we can get it implemented. And that's the issue. The other side is just being outrageous in the allegations they're making. And I think that we've got to talk to those of you who are listening, and you can talk to your friends as well. There are kinks. There are issues that, probably need attention. but let's ask the parties to come together
Pressure them
and
to come
work
together.
it out instead of
Yeah.
spewing at each other.
For the betterment of the American people, which, I mean, we're the ones in their little monopoly game. You know, we're the ones that are going to be hurting because of their.
Well, has anyone here actually heard of anyone getting in the health insurance exchange website or changing their health care?
I have not talked to anyone personally. No.
You know, and this isn't a surprise because there's almost zero conversation around here anyway.
Yeah,
I think all of Pennsylvania about this, except negative, vague things. The truth of the matter is Pennsylvania also has a fight going on about who can offer advice on going into the exchange and choosing policies that are appropriate for you. These people are called navigators. If you listen to the national news media, they'll talk about navigators. As far as I can tell, there's no navigators here in central Pennsylvania. I don't know.
And I think one of the reasons is that Pennsylvania is fighting it. So
well,
why would you establish a process of information if your state governor...
And part of this is the insurance agents have gotten together. This is nationwide. I don't know about Pennsylvania specifically. And they're opposing, like, community organizations from coming in and advising people. They say they're not qualified. I mean, when people do this, they never say, well, it's taken business away from us. But I'm going to make that statement. I believe that's the motivation of many of the insurance agents thing. And so in Pennsylvania, there's been opposition, and I think so far the navigators haven't been licensed. You need to get some training, because it's the insurance agents who want to control. They want people to come through them
to make more money. Well, we have our first break coming up, so we'll come back with a little wrap up on the Affordable Care Act, and then get into some other issues that are of some importance to us, and I'm sure to the folks who are watching. Let's take our break.
Overlooking the city of Altoona, the Booker T. Washington Park had lost its luster. With that in mind, Operation Our Town and the Central Blair Recreation and Park Commission, in collaboration with the NAACP, set out to give back to the community.
The court was in bad shape. It needed some new backboards, rims. There was cracks. There was grass growing up onto the court itself.
New additions to the park will include a renovated basketball court, playground for families and friends, fitness stations, and a walking path.
I can't wait till everything is done, so I can bring my grandkid to play in the playground.
Kids can use it for whatever their imagination brings them.
Members of the community already have noticed a difference.
Stuff for the kid to do to keep him out of trouble.
Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We just had a rather extensive discussion on the Affordable Care Act. And I guess the bottom line is that there are provisions of the Act that may be at least postponed for a while. If both sides of the aisle decide. Now, the Republicans have a bill that they're presenting as we speak to their committee that would mandate that people could keep their plans regardless of what the companies have done in the meantime. But there are other provisions of the Act that deal with penalties for not signing up appropriately or refusing to sign up at all. And I think these are issues that will probably be on the table if they can come together. Because I think under the current system, the current circumstances, I think if the president would insist that nothing be done, which he has not done that. He's already been quoted as saying that there are some issues that have to be addressed, and he's willing to do it. So I think what we have to say to people is be patient and understand that the president and the people around him never intended to put forth a faulty bill. They didn't anticipate, just like a lot of us get into endeavors that we don't anticipate everything that could happen. So I guess our best advice to you is have faith that it's going to work out, because it's not going to be overturned.
Yeah.
because it's the law of the land.
And realize that, I mean, all the misinformation that the Republicans, the scare tactics that they used previously, aren't coming to true. There's no death panels. There's no people marching your grandfather off to be euthanized. None of that's true. Just give it a chance.
Any closing comments on that, and while we move into something else? Tom, you?
No, just I agree. Nobody has a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not magicians, we're not mind readers, and I think once everything settles down and people sit down and discuss this on a reasonable level, I think things will get done.
See, I think the thing that is so distressing, and I think it's the whole state of politics today, particularly in Washington. I think this is the first time in American history where there has been no dialogue, period, between the two parties on major issues. And I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but I don't know of any. Now, they've all gotten together and voted to name a post office for George Thompson in Altoona or something, but that's, that only impacts George ego.
And the comment I have is this is very confusing. When you try to read the rules, it is very confusing. Eligibility for the subsidies. I mean, and there's two distinct things. I was talking about the Medicaid expansion, and this is for people whose income is lower. Lower meaning, though, like $28,000 for a family. I mean, under the Obamacare, people with that amount of income can actually get Medicaid. But there's a group of people that get subsidized. And one of the ironies of this Medicaid rejection is the people that that the Obamacare assumed would get Medicaid under the expansion. And I think these are people up to 137% of the federal poverty level, which how much is that? Maybe that is the $28,000 for a family. For those people, it's not being expanded under Corbett.
Yeah, right.
So here in Pennsylvania, you already have Medicaid already for people that are 100% of poverty. So they're already eligible for Medicaid. Although it's never that simple, there's different categories of people. If they're disabled, there's a set of criteria. Anyway, I don't want to get into the complications, mainly because I don't know if I give accurate information. But for those people that are between 100% of federal poverty level and 137%, in other words, that 37% of the people, which translates in Pennsylvania to approximately 700,000 people, they won't get subsidies either. For those people that, let's say, have their insurance canceled, and they're all panicking, how dare Obamacare do this? I like my insurance policy. Well, they can't get on the exchange right now to find out what alternate insurance is available. And they also don't know what subsidies would be given, because Obamacare gives the ability of a person to pay for insurance. There's different levels of care. And the levels, the subsidy for these levels of care depend on the person's income. And since the people can't get on the exchange in Pennsylvania,
they can't get the answer
they don't know
need.
what the alternatives is. They just know their insurance has been canceled.
And I think that's what people have to understand too. There are no regulations that just cover a whole group of people. Everybody has to get on and explain their own private circumstance, their income and the family and all this. So it's going to take time, and that's the whole thing. And I think what we can recommend to our audience is that you ought to get on the phone or do the email or send a letter to Bill Schuster and Pat Toomey and tell them to encourage their party to come to the table to discuss these issues, because the Republicans have unalterably refused at this point to sit down and work out the issues. They want to pass a law that's going to challenge a part of the existing law, which is not the way to do it from the old school. If there was a bill that contains some issues that are not clear cut, the parties sit down and work it out. So if you have a concern, the law is not going to go away. It's the law of the land, and the Senate will never vote to override it. And obviously the president will never vote.
Yeah, so it's just a waste of time.
It is. And get to the table and solve it.
And making more animosity.
And with that in mind, I know we haven't given you the key to your future health care, but if we don't have the parties come together.
Arm yourself with facts.
Yeah, find out. And you know, Schuster and Toomey and the other members of the other side are out there spewing these lies and half-truths. And like George said, if that's all you hear.
All right, coming between you and your doctor. None of that is happening. You have choices. Actually, you have choices now. Instead of having one policy, you have several choices on the insurance exchange.
Republicans champion.
And they're all private. You know, like just all sorts of garbage being put out by people. No wonder everyone's confused. Most of the people that would actually benefit from this have no idea what the law says because there's been misinformation. The ideas they have actually are wrong. I'm very anxious to, it's really too bad that this initial health insurance exchange was flawed in its implementation, and it's very complex. I mean, holy heck, other countries do this. We could have had here in the United States something like Medicare, just everyone is covered by a simple insurance policy. No, we want to condition everything on income, on whether you're disabled, you know, you get more than whether you're normal, so to speak. I mean, there's all sorts of qualifiers built into the law, and it wasn't mainly the Democrats that wanted this. It was the Republicans. They want all these qualifiers, and so it's a complicated system because of that.
And that's the problem. Instead of working it out so that it is the most simple approach, and the single payer would have been the answer to everything.
Wasn't allowed to be discussed.
And see, that's the point, and why you would begin a process with a condition that was doomed to failure is inconceivable. But nonetheless, keep the faith, and I know that's a hard thing to do sometimes when all you hear are attacks, but let's be a little more positive. We can work it out if we come to the table. So make sure the other side keeps hearing that. Come to the table.
I'd like to touch briefly on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because it will affect Obamacare also. Right now, there are behind closed doors, and they have been for the past 4 years, negotiating this trade agreement, which is like NAFTA on steroids. That's what it's been described as. It is between the United States, Chile, Canada, Mexico, Brunei, Malaysia. I mean, there's like 40 countries that are in negotiations now, and little of it has to do with trade. There's only 5 pages in a 29-page agreement that has to do with trade, actually, with tariffs and stuff. But most of it is protecting business. So they have more things that they can't accomplish through regular democratic processes. They're trying to slide through the TPP. As in drug prices. Right now, there's a limit to how much the drug can charge for the patent. There's so many years that they can keep their prices high. The TPP is going to do away with that. So right now, like your AIDS drugs, you know, HIV, and even cancer drugs, they're going to be able to deny people through like keeping their patents longer so that regular people can't get it. So that is a huge, when already the drug companies are making so much money.
How many provisions of that act would impact people? The Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it involves all facets of trade, and you use an
there's
example
only 5 pages that deal with trade and tariffs and stuff like that. The rest of it is so business can monopolize and make more money and do away with things. Like right now there are some regulations that stop them from doing things like patents and everything else. Well, the TPP is going to do away with that. People really need to get educated on the TPP because there is going to be huge civil rights and human rights violations that it's going to impact.
But you say to get educated about it, and I've looked into it a little bit, and everything's secret.
Yeah, it is.
So
Absolutely.
So it's sort of hard to get educated about it when it's all being conducted sort of secretly.
There are some facts that you can get off, and I think the organization is stoptpp.org, and they have a wealth of information on their website. You're right. The majority of it is secret, but there are some things we know, and that is a main one with the doing away with patents. Actually,
do we know who is representing the United States?
It's corporate lobbyists.
Well, they have a trade rep, and he's an African American fellow originally. I'm not sure he's still doing it. Did you know his name?
I don't. I
forget his name. It really is under the table, like Robin says. So you don't hear much about it.
So whom would we recommend that the viewers contact if they want to know what this whole thing's about?
I think Robin mentioned the website. That's probably the best you could find out.
Stop. TPP.org, and that stands for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and you can get a list of all the countries that are involved, and hopefully the listing of the issues that they are discussing.
Yeah,
right.
Some of them, what they're
But you know, Robin, this thing of eliminating patents doesn't sound like it. Normally, the United States, because we have a lot of intellectual property, we like patents. So to me, it would be extending the patent protection, not eliminating it.
I'm sorry. I that's what I meant to say.
Extending the patent protection.
Patents, like keeping them
and because we have medicine here very expensive. See, other countries, they actually bid the medicine out. They have formularies.
Oh, yeah.
And it causes different drug companies that make similar medicine. Let's say for diabetes, there's similar medicines.
Yeah.
Well, they have to compete in other countries for let's say the diabetes business, and they bid their prices down in order to get the total market. We're here in the United States, we don't do that. The only one who does it is the VA system, actually.
That's right, they get the exemption.
And their prices are considerably less.
They can negotiate with different companies. And, I remember watching a show on 60 Minutes one time where they went to these pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these drugs, and once they are packaged in the bottles, the containers, there are two rows in which they go into. Those that are geared to America go into one separate, because then the prices are usually put on a lot of these things, and the drugs that are sold to other countries, they're at a much lower price. But because of the patent laws in the United States, that's even at the corporate level they do that.
And also what they're aiming for is the fast track, which is going to keep Congress out of it. Mm-hmm. There is a coalition in Congress that is banding together, and they are against the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Well, of course, the Senate would have to agree to that if it's a treaty.
Well, this goes beyond. This is the executive privilege. They're using that.
Yeah, they've authorized the president to negotiate these things. I mean, with NAFTA.
He's the chief negotiator, which you were mentioning.
Right, and then I think they have an up and down vote on the final package, is the way it works.
There's no amendments, no stripping some of it out. It is a simple up or down vote.
Yeah, this has always been controversial.
That is not good for our democracy.
Well, perhaps what we can do for the next show is to maybe get some information as to what the status is, and what are some of the conditions that may negatively impact us.
We need to petition members of our Congress to band together with the already ones that are against the TPP in order to get a momentum so we can combat this. This is going to be bad for everybody.
Well, it's not necessarily bad for everyone. I'll come to bat. See, we have companies here that sell to other countries.
Yeah.
And so a lot of their profit actually comes from their ability to sell to other countries. And if you get too restrictive, then you...
But to take out the are going to impact people adversely, like allowing business to keep their patents on forever.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like something I would support anyway.
And that's the whole thing. And I think what we should do, in all fairness, is to try to get some information as to what provisions that there are and the impact that they possibly could have. and then we can share that with the folks the next time we have the show. Because, you know, it's those kind of issues that are negotiated, and then all of a sudden you don't know what went on and who's doing it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you presented, here's the new
law.
and people are saying, well, I didn't even know you were working on it.
Yeah. And it is everything is done in secrecy, and
Yeah, I know
that reeks.
The only thing I read about is actually I get emails from Public Citizen, and that's one of their topics, and they are very critical.
Yeah, they're one of the groups. If you go on Public Citizen, I think they have some information also.
Yeah, they do, and they have
publiccitizen.com.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it is.
It might be org.
Org.com.
I just get the emails, and so I need to pay attention to the link.
We really need to be on top of this, because this could really impact us adversely.
Well, that's something we don't want. Well, we're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we want to talk a little bit about the elections that we had just a week ago, and a couple other things that should be of interest to the viewers.
Graphics aren't flashy, or if your audio doesn't sound perfect, or if you're not the world's greatest camera person. We just want to see what you want us to see, and to know what you would like us to know. Your local public access television station has tools and resources to make this possible, so that we can see what you see. It's the freedom to communicate, and it's only on cable.
Behind the wheel, there is no such thing as a small distraction. A public service reminder from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, who would rather help keep your bones strong than put them back together. Speak out against distracted driving at decidetodrive.org.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move on to a couple other issues, but just for your information, if you want to know more about this Trans-Pacific Partnership, get on the internet, tpp.org or com, or get on to Public Citizen, and it'll give you some more information, and we will come back next time and have a little more for you too, because it could have some devastating impacts on the average citizen, particularly when it gets to this thing about drugs. If there are lifelong patents, then people can't, you know, they always talk about competition. That's what I don't understand. Mm-hmm. They want schools to compete, they want everybody to compete, but lo and behold,
Republicans tout the free market.
Yeah, and the free market works as long as it's filling their pockets with the dough.
Yeah.
And so keep that in mind, you know, we want free trade, we want competition in the drugs and in medicine and everything else. So
it's a better market for the consumer and not for business.
We want to take care of the consumer and not the provider so much. Okay, the elections. Sad news is that in Blair County, we had 18% of the registered voters vote. 18%. Now, I know we didn't have a whole bunch of candidates, but we had a mayor in Altoona. 18% of the people voting. That means 9.1% of the people could have elected the mayor. Now, is that what the citizens of Altoona want?
Yeah.
Less than 10% of the people tell you who's going to be your elected leaders?
The apathy is phenomenal, not in a good way. People constantly say that politics doesn't affect them, but then they don't vote, they don't get involved, and yet when all this bad starts happening, oh, why is it happening? Well, because you weren't involved. You know, one person can make a difference.
Comments?
Yeah. Well, the school board was the same way. You know, with 2 of the 3 people that we supported for school board made it.
And you know how many Democrats there are now in the Altoona School Board?
Yeah.
You know how many Democrats there are in the City Council of Altoona?
0, isn't it?
0.
And you know, one of the reasons people, I don't think, get enthused is what were the actual choices? You had names out there. You had no interview that I was aware of with the two candidates talking to each other, what their solutions for Altoona were. There's just a total lack of any involvement by the news media. Even that's supposed to be their job to tell people what differences there are, what the issues are.
It's their responsibility to keep our democracy alive.
Everything's invisible, and no one seems to care. They vote on. Well, I guess it's the party they vote on because there are a lot of straight party votes.
Absolutely.
And
well, with the mayor's race, didn't the Act 47 deal just take the wind out of the sails of the mayor's race?
Well, the thing about the mayor's race is, though, that ever since 1987, when Altoona voted for the strong
city manager,
since that day forth, the mayor has been nothing more than a figurehead. And I say this all the time to show you how little concern that they have for the mayor of Altoona. He doesn't even have an office in City Hall.
Yeah.
He works out of his basement at home.
Well, and even the city manager was very low visibility. I mean, Joe Weekland actually ran the city, but you wouldn't know it from just reading things. They always publicize city council, but really Joe Weekland, the city manager, was running the city.
And now Omar Strong's running it. Now, although Joe's being hired as a consultant to help the transition. Now, the Government Study Commission that is now working has to come out, and they say they're ready to vote in December. I read in the paper the other day that they're going to vote to decide what kind of government we want here in the city of Altoona to go forth. And once they decide that, then they have to present a proposal that has to be voted on, and I don't know whether it'll be November of 2015, or 2014, which I would think it would have time to be. But every single, in my humble opinion, once they come out with their report, whether they form a strong mayor. Now, you heard former Mayor Hippo coming out saying he supports a strong mayor form of government, because today the mayor has no say in anything other than a suggestion.
Yeah, everyone seems to think it's either the way it used to be back in 1987, where you had the city council people in charge,
and they were
certain
paid
segments. Well, yeah, they were paid. And if you actually go on the AltoonaPA.gov website, and there's an open government link there, and you click on that, then they have actually one of the summary report of the 1987 study. And you know, I said this on the program before. You start reading the reasons that they recommended back then, the city manager, it was going to resolve all the issues. They mentioned several issues that, guess what, are the issues now. In other words, the same issues they're trying to resolve. Back in 87, they went from the strong mayor to city council to the city manager, thinking that would resolve it. Apparently it hasn't. The same issues are current now, and so now their solution is to go back to the way it was in 1987. I mean, it doesn't need to be the same. There's graduations. That's the thing with the open, like you say, they can come up with the study commission. They can come up with an in-between.
That's right. They can come up. They can actually recommend the style of government that they want the city of Altoona to have. Now, if they want a strong mayor, they would have to delineate what the responsibilities of that person would be. They just can't say we want a strong mayor, because you have 7 council members who ultimately vote on things. But then again, if they have no say in the hiring, firing, selection, direction of staff, implementation, development of goals and missions and so on, you know, what's the sense? So there's got to be an overhaul of the whole system, and the taxation issue has to come up, because if you change the form of government now, you will be out of the requirements for the third-class city code, which puts limits on what you can tax, how much you can tax. Now, if they decide to get out of that, then they're going to have to decide what kind of taxation rights are we going to have.
Well, and they lose the ability to tax the transients that come into Altoona to work.
So you have to take a look at what will they say. And the biggest concern I have in that respect is if the people have to go to the polls and they have to vote on the recommendations that the commission is making, they're going to have to know what the commission recommended. And if it's a voluminous document, so let's say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 pages, how are the average citizens in Altoona going to get a copy of that and read it so they are intelligent voters? I don't know how they're going to do it.
Well, if you right now could watch the study commission deliberate, because they have YouTube clips, and you get on the Altoona City website, look under Open Government or Study Government Commission, and there's YouTube clips of all the meetings.
Yeah, I've been there.
And so
for
far,
one,
I think there's been 8 YouTube clips, and they all tend to be 2 hours. So you have 16 hours of.
Well, we know that won't happen, though.
Oh, no. If you go on some of them, when I was on the most recent one, and I went on, admittedly, maybe a week after it was over, there were only 8 people that had viewed it. So there's not a great big audience for these things, but I'm just saying, you can do it.
We're going to have to find a way for the people to get the information. Here's what you have. Here's what we're proposing. And it can't be a 5 or 10 page report, because you can't put that on the ballot. So before the thing goes on the ballot, we've got to find a way, or the commission's got to find a way, to let the citizens know exactly what's in that document.
Yeah, and some of the solutions have to do, like you say, with money. Yeah. And the Pennsylvania Economy League, who's come into Altoona for years, they've consistently had a recommendation for the city: sue Blair County for reassessment.
Yep. Well, you've heard Thomas Eddy saying on the news just the other day again, maybe the time is coming that we've got to seriously consider reassessment.
Yeah, in this case, the county needs the money.
That's the county, yes. And they need it, you're right, because they're dipping into their reserves. Now, I know we'd like to have gotten into some issues on the state and national level for elections, because I think it's important that we know that on the national level, there was a comprehensive immigration bill passed in the U.S. Senate. Boehner came out yesterday and says that under no circumstance will the House of Representatives look at it this year. They ran in 2012 that they would pass a comprehensive immigration bill.
Yeah.
They are attacking Obamacare. They have yet to come forth with an alternate health care proposal. They've had 3 years from the day that bill was passed to come out with an alternative. Anybody here have heard of a Republican alternative?
No.
I think Paul Ryan is something.
He's supposed to be, but you know what happened at a press conference? Boehner was asked by one of the reporters, I understand the Republican Party's coming up with an alternative. Paul Ryan's coming up with a plan. Could you tell us about it? He said, you're going to have to call Paul.
Is that?
That's what he said. I watched it.
Yeah.
I mean, how grossly ignorant can you be?
Well, repeal and replace. That's the little stock phrase. And
well, that's
like
what they're doing.
Replace with what?
Well, well, Boehner's
budget.
Boehner's under the Tea Party's influence, and that's right.
See, that's
where
another
it
thing
stops.
too. There was some concern that in this past election that maybe the Tea Party would have gotten a very strong message, but unfortunately it wasn't as strong as those of us who don't particularly appreciate some of the things they're pushing. But like in Virginia, we did win strongly. Governor, lieutenant governor, and even the attorney general now is only 164 votes ahead out of 2.2 million cast. But at least there was a vindication, because Cuccinelli was heavily favored and supported by the Tea Party.
Yeah,
and so we're looking at that kind of influence that may be waning.
What is this Tea Party, Frank? I understand they're a charity or something. They're a nonprofit. They act like they're maybe a political organization.
George is, and I don't know why George hasn't got the answer from the right of people, but like George says, everything we do, we've got to report expenditures and incomes,
we
and
have
all
to
of these
say
political
where the
groups have to do that. But the Tea Party doesn't
Yeah,
have
the
to
Tea
report
Party,
it.
they actively solicit from businesses. We're not allowed to take money from
Right.
businesses.
And they can get it in the millions.
Yeah, but they're not
They don't
a
have to
political
be-
action PAC.
I don't know
They're
how
they're
you
a charitable
determine that.
organization. That's amazing. Public interest organization.
Yeah.
And just like with the budget, you know, Paul Ryan and Patty Murray from Washington, the senator, Democratic side, have been meeting for months trying to come up with a budget proposal that could be presented to the Congress. I saw up on Huffington Post this morning, I was searching for some good news, and the headline was, "No progress." Now, where are we going? I mean,
Well, under Obama, one of the ironies of this thing, actually, healthcare expenditures have been increasing with inflation for a number of years. Certainly under the Republican administration, healthcare expenditures were exceeding the inflation
yes,
rate.
now, in fact, they've been, and even for the states that have gone into the exchange business in California, New York, and Florida, the rates have dramatically decreased. I mean,
So
why?
somehow that'll be twisted by the
sure.
Republicans to
as I
like
keep
it's
saying,
their
you know,
initiative to cause the healthcare costs to go
They
down.
have
Yeah.
a very effective Department of Lies and Half-Truths.
Yeah, they do.
Because they all
And they
speak
have
from the same...
Unlimited money behind them.
But by the way, the economy, I believe that's been improving too.
Absolutely.
Certainly, the stock market has been improving.
That's the highest in history.
Yeah.
Well, that couldn't have been Obama either.
No, I
that,
know.
that had to be
That's
some
an aberration, you know. It had nothing to do with his
delayed
leadership.
reaction to George W. Bush's presidency or something.
And how about the Republican Senate refusing to approve nominations to the appeals court?
Yeah.
And now they're threatening the nuclear option again.
Backlogged.
I mean, there are hundreds of nominations to different boards, commissions,
Well, the
courts.
Labor Relations Council, that they won't approve anything there either.
No,
right now,
well.
it's stalemated, isn't it?
Well, I think that the three, they made a deal that they would approve the nominees that Obama made, and we had to give something on the other end. And I forget the solution there, but the NLRB is now working with at least 5 members, with their 5-member complement. But the big issue was the chief counsel of the NLRB was challenged, but I think he's on board now. Well, we're down to a minute and a half, I guess. You know, there's a ton of things that we could talk about. My list is.
Well, what about Chris Christie? We talked about
Oh.
Virginia, but he won big.
Yeah, he won big.
did,
But you know,
unfortunately.
there was a stat yesterday I saw. Christie won by 60%, but 61% of the New Jersey people say we've got to raise the minimum wage, which he's opposed to.
Yeah.
So how can you vote for a guy
That
who's
is
opposed to the minimum
everything
wage for the
being
guy
raised.
who isn't making enough to
gonna-
live on?
When the median price for a house is $240,000,
Yeah.
$30,000, something like that,
And these people are.
and making
they're not even
$8.25 an hour.
How does a family survive on even less than $30,000 a year?
Well, that goes into the disparity of income, the growing disparity of income in the United
absolutely.
States. And you know,
We-
to me, I've read 50% of the households in the United States actually have a negative net worth. Once you factor in their student loan debt, you factor in their
There's no
credit card
savings,
debt,
you know.
you factor in their mortgage on their house. And to me, that's a dangerous situation.
And everything goes up every year.
If you have 50% of the people with a negative net worth, they don't have a lot at stake on different
And they don't think,
issues.
and they should get out and vote, though. That's what we have to
Well,
look at.
I think they
Well,
should.
we're down to the last moments, and folks, thanks for watching. We will be back. The Democrats and the Democratic Party care for you, but we need you to get out and vote and get our candidates elected. We have a lot of elections coming up. You're going to hear a lot from us in the next several months, but please remember, we care, and we want you to care. Vote. Thank you very much, panel.